Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I want to start helping everyone get their hotbars ready for the expansion. Everywhere I look, more and more people are concerned about ability bloat and where they're going to put all their skills. Well, we know the majority of the abilities, and we know their presumed functions, so we should maybe start getting our hotbars ready now. So I'm going to show you how I've been doing that. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying this is the best hotbar setup for this job, etc, etc. I'm just letting you know my thought process and why I'm putting certain abilities where I'm putting them. And I'm also designating them spots before the expansion comes out. So that way when they come out and if they work the way that we think they do, I already know where they're going to go and it won't be confusing to me. I am going to cover keyboard and mouse and controller in this video, so there's an annotation to skip to the controller section. It's really short. There's just one option that I think you need to turn on as a controller player, and that should help a bit, but you should start getting used to it now, so definitely look into it. So let's start off with finding more keybinds and space on the keyboard and mouse setup, because that's pretty hard to do for some people. Now, first of all, if you are using keyboard and mouse, I highly recommend that you get a gaming mouse. It has tons of extra buttons. Mine is 14 extra buttons. I use 12 of them, and then I use other things in order to make even more space on my mouse. So if you can afford one and it works with your setup, I highly recommend checking out like a G600 or a Razer Naga Epic or something like that. The second thing I want to know for your sake is, are you using shift and control modifiers? I mean, if you look at my board right here, you see I got quite a lot of skills set on my hotbar. But you'll notice that this top row right here, shift 1, shift 2, shift 3, shift 4, shift 5, all the way up to shift 6, it definitely allows you to get 3 uses out of a single button press. So I use 1 through 6, shift 1 through 6, and control 1 through 6 on almost every job. Control 5 and 6 I tend to use the least. If I'm going to leave anything empty, it'll be those. But using shift and control modifiers definitely helps, especially when combined with the gaming mouse, because then that means the 12 buttons on the side of your mouse become even more useful. There are even more buttons there that you can make use of. And then do you have any rebound keys that you aren't really using that are around WASD? I mean, let's see here. We have R, T, F, G, H, Z, X, C, and V. Those are all pretty prime candidates to be rebound if you're not really using them for much else. Yes, they do have other functions that are bound to them, but I don't know very often that I use the X's function or the V's function. Even the C's function, which brings up the character menu, I actually use it on this character, but that's a button that I usually rebind in other MMOs like World of Warcraft. So those are all really good buttons to rebind. Also, another thing is A and D. If you still have A and D bound, as you can see I do for the sake of this, you can even unbind those. I find myself just using, E and Q, just strafe left and right. So why even have A and D bound? Yes, while I'm holding right click, A and D technically do the same thing as E and Q, but that way you never run up in a situation where you're doing this. You don't need 4 buttons all with the same feature. You can rebind 2 of them and just make sure you use the other 2 correctly. So that's how I've got all this extra space, all these different binds that I have, or that I have in my back pocket when they add new abilities. Like, these are all things that I've used in the past. So now that we've discussed where we can get some of the extra keybinds to make room for the new skills, let's talk about actually prepping your hotbars with the new abilities. So what I've been doing is I've been using enemy markers, which shift plus M brings those up, and I've been using these to kind of determine ahead of time where am I going to put these new skills. So I simply looked at the function of a new skill, the frequency of its use, and applied them to the binds I may or may not use very often. Now keep in mind, like I said, I do have one of those gaming mice. I have a Razer Naga Epic, so I have the 12 buttons on the side, and I also have the modifiers for that as well. So let's start off with my bard. I've already done these ahead of time, so you don't have to watch me do them. You can see right on shift 2 and 3, I have target to attack 1 and target to attack 2. Now, those are the 2 new songs for bard. Shift 2 is going to be Wanderer's Minuet, because I see us using that quite frequently, and I imagine it's going to be used a lot more often than the other songs, especially considering it doesn't conflict with Foes, Ballad, or Paean. Also, we have Keeper's Paean, and while we don't know what it does, they make it seem like it's going to be a general buff that we're going to have to maintain at some point or another. It's another party-wide buff that doesn't, again, conflict with the other 3 songs, Foes, Ballad, and Paean. So I expect that both of these songs are going to be used pretty frequently. So therefore, I am just going to keep them in a spot where I can switch between them when I need to ASAP. And then I have the abilities that can only be used in Wanderer's Minuet, which is Ironjaw, Sidewinder, and Empyrean Arrow. Those are all going to be shift plus the numpad buttons plus my mouse buttons. So those are all only going to be used when Wanderer's Minuet is active. So I feel comfortable putting them on the shift mouse modifiers just because they're not something I'm going to be reaching for constantly, and they're really easy to reach anyway, so I have access to them when Wanderer's Minuet is up. For adding something like Bard, it's pretty simple. I didn't need to change too much, because unless you're binding all of your songs to like keys, which I am going to do as well when the expansion comes, rebind foes, mages, and armies Payon, there's a lot of open room on my hotbars. Like, I even have a PvP ability here, and that's going to be the other thing when we have to start talking about PvP binds when the expansion comes out, because combined with the new abilities, that is where things are really going to get rough. So we spoke about Bard. Let's look at another job. Let's look at the Paladin, for example. I've done this for most of my jobs. Like, I've done it for Warrior, Paladin, and whatnot. So let's look at Paladin. Now, Paladin's a special case because Paladin's getting new abilities in their main rotation. So that's a little bit more complicated than just adding a few cooldowns to use or something like that. So what I actually did is I made it very similar to my Warrior in a sense. So let me pull up my Warrior real quick so you can use it as a point of reference. So Warrior, here's how I have it set. I have Heavy Swing, Skull Sunder, Maim, and Butcher's Block. So then for my Maim combo, it breaks off into 2 combos. So I have both of those combos set to R and T. Just a personal preference. I've gotten really used to it as a Warrior, and for some reason, it just works really well for me. So, with my Paladin, because we're getting 2 abilities off of Savage Blade, I decided to take a similar approach. So now I have Fast Blade, Savage Blade, Riot Blade, and this is going to be Gore Blade. This is going to be one of the other new abilities that they're getting that ends off of Riot Blade. So instead of Butcher's Block, I have the Riot Blade combo ending here. But I have my Savage Blade combos ending on Rage of Halone R, and this is going to be Royal Authority, which is target to attack 1. So I just decided to make it similar to my Warrior, so the binds are somewhat comfortable to me going between the 2 jobs, and whenever I switch between them because I'm bored, it won't be too confusing for me to, re-get used to the other one. But then you have the other cooldowns. You have Divine Veil and Clemency. I have both of those over at Shift 2 and 3 for the mouse buttons, with Shift 1 and 4 being Shield Oath and Sword. I almost said Sword. Sword Oath, because I expect to switch between them a lot more often come expansion time. It is raining like crazy outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that. And then I have Sheltron, which I'm just going to call Phalanx from now on. I have that over here, over on Control 1. That's right next to Shield Swipe because they trigger each other. Well, Sheltron triggers Shield Swipe, so I want to have them right next to each other. Pretty simple binds. Even though I had to move some things around because of the new combo abilities, it still wasn't that difficult to get a grasp on what I was doing. Oh, looks like I'm going to have friends. Looks like, we have a cameo. Mew told me he wanted to be in a video again, so there you go, Mew. There's your cameo into a Mr. Happy video. I'm sure he's gonna love that one. So then, okay, the last job I want to take a look at. I'm not gonna do this for every job. I'm just trying to give more broader examples of yeah, great English. I'm trying to give broader examples of different scenarios and how my thought process is going through. So with Monk, before I had to move all my abilities around for the expansion, I had so much empty space. All of Control 1 through 6, 5 and 6 were empty, Shift 5 and 6 were empty. I didn't use any of the Shift mouse button modifiers. There's so many buttons on Monk that you just don't use unless you're playing in a super situational situation. Yeah, that there's so much extra room, like Arm of the Destroyer and One Ill Punch and Haymaker and Fracture and Featherfoot. Like, there's so few situations where I use these abilities that I just move them onto my bar whenever I think I'm going to need them for a fight. So I decided to take all that empty space and use it for the new abilities. So I have there's a lot of mechanics going on. Monk also happened to get a lot more abilities than the other jobs. So again, it's a little bit more complicated. So first we have Chakra, which is an ability in itself that sits on the global cooldown. And it's something you're really only going to be using when you're out of range of a target to hit. You're not going to be trying to weave it because it's on the global cooldown. So you're going to be using, like, imagine Titan Hard Mode or Titan Extreme when he jumps into the air. That's the time when you use Chakra. You would also use it before the fight starts so you could burst down a target right at the beginning of the fight. Or if you need it early into the fight for bursting down any target, you'll have it available. So I decided to put that on mouse button 7. It's a button I can easily reach, and it's something that I can spam without much discomfort. Then we have some other abilities. Let's see, what else do we have here? We have the 2 abilities that you can expend Chakra on, which is Forbidden Chakra and Purify. So I decided to stick Forbidden Chakra on Control 1. I'm going to put this along with the other new ability, Tornado Kick, which is the one that expends all your Grease Lightning stacks that do a ton of damage. I'm going to put those next to each other so I have my burst abilities right next to each other on my hotbars. And then I'm going to stick Purify, which gives you some TP back, right next to Invigorate, since that way I have all my TP abilities in the same area. Let's see, what do we have next? We have change form. Change form is another interesting one. It's one you'll probably use quite often, especially for jumping targets where you may lose perfect balance or something like that, or may lose grease lightning, twin snakes, dragon kick. It allows you to switch between your forms to more quickly get through your buffs and get them up just faster. So I want that to be in a spot where I can reach it again very easily. So I have it on R right next to my E key so I can strafe and press it at the same time. It's pretty simple. Didn't mean to jump off the roof right there. And then what else do we have? I feel like I'm missing them. Nope, Tornado Kick. And then we also have Elixir Drive, which is a new like Kamehameha like AoE ability that they're getting. I stuck that next to Rock Breaker, which I had just put here as well. So both of my major AoE skills are next to each other on the hotbar. That's something I like doing with almost all my jobs, is sticking the AoE abilities right next to each other. I know you're probably thinking, what about Howling Fist? We're just going to include that separately because I'm going to use that on single targets anyway. So, wow, that's a lot of stuff. So you can kind of see where my thought process goes. On jobs with moderate keybind usage, I can fit a few skills in with my old bindings and then use the new mouse bindings for some of the new ones. For jobs that have like higher uses or more concentrated ability use, I generally move some of the older abilities around more to put in the new, more useful skills, and then I delegate an entire subsection to certain abilities. And then you have jobs like the Monk, which, you know, have so much open hotbar space that I could just stick anything where I want and reorganize anything where I want, since I have so many abilities that are so situational. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of this is personal preference, but giving you some insight into my thought process on how you're going to find space for new hotbars, that was really the entire point of the video, was getting you to sort of think about your hotbar usage and what do you really use often, what do you not use often, are you wasting keybinds on certain things like emotes or changing jobs as opposed to putting those off on the side. It's definitely a lot about thinking about your in-combat action bars. I don't want to touch the PvP binds yet because, oh my goodness, that is going to be a disaster when 3.0 comes out and we need to find room for our PvP key bindings on top of these new key bindings. I'm not looking forward to that. But anyway, on that note, I did promise that we would take a quick look at the controller setup, so I'm going to switch characters real quick, and then we'll take a look at controller. Alright, so there we go. I'm on my controller character, the one I have over on the Behemoth server. I use this character just for testing out controller functionality and whatnot, and also just to show that you can do it. But anyway, so for your standard controller player, you know, you have the cross hotbar. I have that hotbar above, but I don't use that to click any skills. I just have it there, and it's there to track my cooldowns and whatnot. So generally you have the first 16 buttons, you know, you hold left trigger, you hold right trigger, and you press, you know, the face buttons or the directional buttons, whatever. Then you can press R1 and it will, you know, toggle on to the next section. This is how I have it set up, at least. These are the only two that it cycles between, and I'll be going that as well. So I just press R1 and I can switch between them pretty quickly. Gives me 32 buttons at a pretty quick access rate. But you're probably going to need more than 32 buttons when the expansion comes out. So let's go over to character configuration, hotbar settings, and cross hotbar. So the big thing that I want to highlight is the use of expanded controls. This allows you to hold down one trigger and then hold down the other trigger in order to access 8 buttons individually. So what I mean by that is, see how the first one is display cross hotbar 3 on the left side when I hold left trigger and then hold right trigger afterwards. That gives me access to all of these buttons, these 8 buttons, which I made cross hotbar 3, so I have an extra 8 buttons. It's not taking from cross hotbar 2 or anything. And I can do the same with the right trigger and then hold left trigger. Now I have access to these buttons, like, oh, Blizzard 2, yay. And it gives me effectively 48 buttons as a controller user instead of only the 32. Now, if you want, you could choose to just toggle between all the abilities with just the usage of R1 if you really wanted to, which case you would probably want to go down here. I believe that all you have to do is do that. Let me just double check. It's been a while since yeah. So just enabling those, whether you're sheathed or not, or you're in combat, it'll change which hotbars you actually toggle between. I have it set to just be 1 and 2, so that way it's quick just between the 2 hotbars that I have. It's just this. You know what I mean? And then I have these. So it effectively gives you 48 buttons to work with as a controller player. So I highly recommend, if you're a controller player, you get used to that. Not every controller player has like a foot pedal or something like that, or some sort of extra peripheral that they can take their hand off the controller to use. And that is an option as well. Make setting it so that your keyboard actually has a few binds as a controller player, and then using those to execute extra actions. I know plenty of controller players that do that. I generally like to keep my hands on the controller at all times, not have to divert myself away from paying attention to my main source of movement and attack. So that's just the way that I recommend doing it. Now, of course, there are plenty of other tricks and things that you could do for both keyboard and mouse and controller. So if anybody has anything to add in the comment section of the video, I would really appreciate that, and I'm sure everyone watching would as well. But anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.